As I was reading these texts this morning, especially the one in Matthew, beginning with the young child Jesus and the visit of the wise men or the sages, for some reason it popped into my mind. I was thinking how simple life was, how manageable and easy life seemed until I had kids. Do I hear an amen to that? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as a young adult, you do what you want, you get up when you want, you manage what you want, you take the job when you want, you leave the job if you don't. I mean, you do that, and I can handle that. You have a partner or a spouse, you get married or whatever. You take another person into that relationship, and that's not so hard either. You get up, you do it, you work together, you take out the garbage, you do all that. That's pretty simple to do as well. But you throw in a kid, and everything changes because they are, raising kids is so fun. Because when children enter your life, everything changes. Everything becomes different, predictable, and even from child to child. We had our first child. We did pretty good, we thought, with that. We said, okay, we got this parenting thing down. We'll have another. And they come out entirely different. Nothing that you thought works. It's not the same. You have to learn it all again and again and again. That's where we stopped. Because children change everything. You got that registered? Are we in compliance here? Okay. Which can be frustrating. I mean, that can be really frustrating, this change, because, none of us deal with change really that well. But it can also be very valuable. I want you to hear me now. It can be very valuable because children also keep us in touch. They keep us in touch with the world that's coming. They keep us in touch with broader perspectives, different perspectives, generational perspectives that we might otherwise wish not to hear, see, or tolerate. They're the ones who do make us, in many respects, more tolerable and understanding. Piercings, tattoos, I don't get that stuff. And when I see others with them, but when my own kids do it, I'm a bit more understanding, accepting, and tolerant. Facebook. How many of you use Facebook? And how many of you use Facebook not because you want to use Facebook, but because you want to stay in touch with your kids or grandkids? You see? They keep us current, they keep us in touch. And in the process, whether we recognize it or not, by doing that, kids change us. Everything changes with children. You see? Even when, because they're changing, whether actively or passing, the next generation is always changing the world. And whether we like the change or we're not, especially when it's our own kids bringing it at us, we still love them. Because we're vested in them. Right? We're vested in them. I think you know I'm right. Which may be why, when we look at this Epiphany story, this God story, this Jesus narrative, this incarnational thing, this God becoming flesh story, the divine does not choose to possess an adult. But rather, the divine chooses to work in the world through the development of a child. Because we all know with children, there's a clue here. When children come, things are gonna change. They're gonna change. Matthew is telling us right away it's gonna be different. And this change for Matthew begins immediately when the first people who come to visit this young boy, this child, are foreigners. They're people that have a different religion, a different faith, a different background. They're Zoroastrianists. They are magi from the east. These are the people who recognize and worship and offer material as well as spiritual gifts. Only Herod says, I will pretend to be as devout as them and know what's going on, but he doesn't have a clue. It is they, not Jesus' own people in this story, who recognized and understood what's happening first. You see, in the story, what Matthew tells us is the sages go, the wise men go where we would probably go. You know, if we were in this search, we'd probably go to the mayor or the president. I mean, that's where we would go. They would be in touch. They would know what's going on. So they go to Herod. And Herod does what we would expect powerful people to do. He brings around all the knowledgeable people and all the powerful people and all the who's who of Judea. They should know what's going on. He surrounds himself by people, this is it, but he surrounds himself by people whose world is no bigger than the world they already live in. You know, isn't that interesting? He calls these scholars, he calls these yes people into his presence. What Herod does is he calls people into his world to tell him what's going on who are just like him. And more than that, they're afraid to tell him anything is different. But not these foreigners. These wise men are searching for something different. They are searching for a child. They are searching for a child, and they know that children bring change. This is shocking. I mean, this is not your cute little narrative you set up. This is shocking truth here. Shocking. But what does it mean? What is Matthew trying to say to people then and to us? Coming back to the same point. Matthew is telling the readers of his story, get ready. Things are going to change. And when this child grows up, Jesus continues to embrace this change. This change we see by these sages kneeling before him. Because as he grows up, the people he reaches the most are the people who least understand or are credited with least understanding. The people that listen to him and he welcomes and he embraces and he eats with and he has fellowship with. They are not the in-group. They are not the in-group. He begins by calling Galilean disciples, people from the north. My goodness, they weren't from Judah. They weren't Judean. Everybody knows that those people are unsophisticated, uneducated. They are northerners. They are farmers. They are probably, for the most part, illiterate. Calls them. And among them, he calls a tax collector, crook, thief. Has the audacity to talk to women, to welcome children, to touch lepers. He's continually reaching out to these outsiders. And his first healing, or one of his first miraculous healings, is of a child dying who is the child of a Roman centurion. Once again, an oppressor. Once again, someone his own people hated. And once again, someone not of his particular religious persuasion. You see, from the beginning, from this very story, the Gospels clue us in that with this child, things will be different. That with this child, it was not so important as who you were and what you did as who you were by how you lived. What was found in your heart. That's what was important. You see, Matthew is telling us that with this child, there is something really special being born here. A new vision for community. A new vision for how we should live. You see, the world lives, and the world we create always has these boundaries. It's always got these divisions. But this child, who grew to be a man, his followers said, were their master and their Lord, which means ruled over them, that they submitted to him. He sought to tear down those divisions and those walls. They meant nothing to him. Which made Jesus not so very popular with the people who tried to maintain and protect the status quo. It did not earn him the Man of the Year, the front page on Newsweek, Time, or Forbes magazine. It got him a cross. Because whenever you challenge those traditional ways of thinking, there will be, as Herod tried from the very beginning, the powers that will seek to kill you. You know, we all love kids. We especially love kids when they are little. You know, adults make fools of themselves in front of babies. You see these very sophisticated PhD leaning over and going, goo, 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 goo. Right? We all love kids. We all love babies. Until they start growing out of our control. You know, when we had our firstborn, my parents drove me nuts. They would come over to our house and they would grab the kid and they'd move his legs like this and his arms, and all in an effort, this kid's got to walk, he's got to walk, he's got to walk. Well, who's going to walk? Watch him at 9 months when he starts to walk. Because, you know, when they're little and you put a baby down, it's nice to be able to leave and come back and know they'll still be there. We carried around our thirdborn forever. Right? Because when they grow and they develop, things change. They're changing. And we have to change with them. You know, saying, once they start moving, it never stops. Are you following me here? Yeah, okay. Some of you are familiar with the Bible translation I read. I read from the translation. It's really a paraphrase, not a scholarly translation, called The Message. But it caught my eye this morning, especially as I read the Ephesians text, which is Paul preaching to the early church. Paul preaching a number of years after the whole Jesus narrative in terms of death, resurrection has come to an end. And Paul says to those Christians in Ephesus, which is now Turkey, he says, "This is why I, Paul, am in jail for Christ, having taken up the cause of you outsiders, so-called. I take it that you're familiar with the part I was given in God's plan for including everybody. And I got the inside scoop from God. The mystery is that people who have never heard of God and those who have heard of God all their lives, insiders and outsiders, I'm telling you, they stand on the same ground before God. Wow. They get the same offer, the same help, the same promises. It is all accessible and welcome to everyone, Paul says, across the board. Friends, this is the change that Matthew reminds us of with the wise man. And I like it. I like being included. I like that message. I love that y'all come. Where I have a problem with it is I don't want you to come. You got that? I want to be included. You want to be included. But then, you know what? We start getting sketchy a little farther out. That's where things change, because we would like to be those who dictate the inside, the outside group. Paul says there is no right or wrong. There is no up or down. There is no in or out. The playing field is level. Paul says that's not our job. That's God's job. Our job is to learn how to love and to forgive and to accept and to care for shepherds as well as kings, wise men as well as fools. Which if we actually did, if this change actually came about, especially in this time of partisan this and separatist that, can't we all just get along? Because if we did, if we took care of what we're supposed to take care of, the loving, the accepting, the hearing, the tolerance, the care, the nurture, the things that we can handle rather than worrying about who's in and who's out. If we did those things, maybe God could do God's job at last. Maybe God would have the opportunity to do the rest. But for this to happen, as I've said repeatedly, things must change. Which may be why what's important in this story is not the gifts. We always focus on the gifts. We focus on the gold, frankincense, and myrrh. That's what we think of with the wise men. Maybe what we should remember, what's important here, is not the gifts the wise men bring to the child Jesus, but the gift that the wise men are. The gift that the wise men are with this baby Jesus to us. Do you follow me? Not the gifts they bring, but the gift they are in opening our eyes, of enabling us to see beyond the world that we design, a world based upon separation, to seeing with the eyes of radical inclusiveness, because those are the eyes of God's love. At that manger, it's not merely a child that is born. At that manger, a new sense of community is being born. And it is into that community that this child invites us. It is the gift our world needs if we are ever going to emerge from the vitriolic air we are currently breathing. The atmosphere of divisiveness in which we now exist. Because that child calls us into a different world. That child calls us into the world of peace. That child is the Prince of Peace. And the Prince of Peace says this world, this community can be born in you. So you see, Christmas and Epiphany, what do they really give us? I mean, what have you left? What's the story? What's the one world? What Christmas and Epiphany give us is a child. I think we all concur with that. Epiphany and Christmas give us a child. And as I have said repeatedly, and you have agreed with me, when children enter into our lives, things are going to change. And with Jesus, I submit to you, this change at times is radical. The question that remains is whether or not we allow this child and this vision not merely to be born, but to develop and to grow. Because that's where the texts are going to lead us, from birth to childhood to manhood. Are we going to allow this vision, this child, this story, this salvation narrative to grow? To grow not around us before it grows into and through us. And it is my prayer that this may be so. Amen.